Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast. Join us as we delve into the dynamic world of pharmacy, exploring the latest trends, innovations, and insights that shape the industry. Our podcast is proudly brought to you by the Independent Pharmacies of Australia Group, IPA, dedicated to supporting independent and bannered pharmacies nationwide. At IPA, we're committed to connecting all member pharmacies under the Independent Pharmacies of Australia national banner, recognized by Australians for elevating community healthcare to meet local needs. Our vision drives our mission to empower pharmacists and pharmacy professionals. From discussions on healthcare advancement and regulatory updates to interviews with industry experts and success stories from pharmacy professionals, we cover it all. Our goal is to inspire and equip pharmacists to thrive in today's ever-evolving landscape. In today's episode, we have the pleasure of sitting down with Steven Kastriaskis, Managing Director, Pharmacist, and partner of the Independent Pharmacies of Australia Group, IPA. Steve is deeply committed to our industry and leads the Independent Pharmacies of Australia Group in its mission to support a network of leading independent and bannered pharmacies nationwide. Join us as we delve into Steve's insights, vision, and exciting journey ahead for IPA and the independent pharmacy sector. I want to know a little bit more about you, Steve. Take me to the very beginning. So you are from Greece?
No, I was born here. My parents are of Greek background.
Okay, so you were actually born in Australia because you go there all the time for holidays. So I just assumed that you were at least first generation.
No, second generation. And I didn't actually get to Greece until I was 23 for the very first time. So I had never visited the country up until I was, it's not much later in the piece.
Exactly. You were telling me about it the last time we spoke. I think it was around Christmas. Have you been back since?
Well, the fact that, my father has now moved to Greece in the last 12 months. And he's now a permanent resident, so he's made a choice to go and live there. And as a result, I try and get to see him if I can twice a year when I have some leave. So the last time I went was in December, and it was really because I'd never had Christmas in Europe before.
Okay.
And also my father turned 85 on New Year's Day, so I thought it was actually great to go and see him as well and, have Christmas with him, and he's by himself. So I just wanted to spend a couple of weeks as well, which was really enjoyable. And actually, it wasn't as cold as I thought, but anyway, it was just great spending some time with him, roasting some chestnuts on the fire and having some of the traditional foods.
So just going back to your father, so was he a pharmacist?
No. So Dad came out here in the mid-60s. My mother had come out a couple of years before. They had met in the village in Greece and, they had fallen in love, and my mother had come out here with her sisters and had been sort of sponsored to come to Australia. And then Dad followed suit, and he actually was a hairdresser by trade.
Oh.
And it was really funny, he came out here and I think he enjoyed his profession, but wasn't really acceptable because he wasn't a barber, he was a hairdresser. So, there was a bit of a stigma in terms of being a hairdresser.
Yeah.
And he's I think his uncle or the uncles now or some of his relatives were kind of having a bit of a go at him saying, what sort of man, is a hairdresser? You got to get a real job. And then he ended up doing something else, which his grandfather had done, which was saddlery and, sort of making horse bridles and saddles. But his passion was always, I think, hairdressing. And he was very frustrated. And one of the lessons that he taught me was always follow your dreams, follow your passions. And if someone tells you not to do something, there may be a degree of envy. So just use your own filter. And that was a very early lesson because I knew that he was frustrated and he would have been a much better hairdresser than a saddle maker.
True. Yeah, it's always good to follow your dreams. So does that mean that pharmacy is your dream?
I guess it was. I had done work experience, sort of back in year 10 and had a couple of experiences in terms of pharmacy. And my own sort of journey was very personal because I was quite an obese young child, and I had very sore knees as a result of the weight. And I had to visit the pharmacy every Monday, and I used to go and get a bottle of aspirin mixture that was freshly reconstituted. So I had this sort of weekly visit to the pharmacy to have aspirin as a mixture, as an anti-inflammatory. And I just sort of had, so I felt that I was actually a customer / patient sort of quite regularly.
Yeah.
So that was actually my first experience, as a young kid. But also, I did work experience in a pharmacy in a couple of different years, like year 10 and year 11. And I really enjoyed the chemistry part of it, the compounding, just the science behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very much encouraged by my parents in terms of it's the balance of science, but also the ability to be a retailer and your own boss. And that was sort of something that, that my dad had always instilled in me, is that the ability to have choice, to be educated, but also to be able to run a commercial enterprise. And I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but as I got older and I bought my first store in partnership, I actually then realized, what that actually meant.
And so when you bought your first store, would it have been 1992, was it?
92, yep, correct.
92
yeah.
in Mo?
In Moe, yep, in Moe, Victoria, yep.
When looking back,
yeah,
how old were you? You would have been,
20,
look at
24.
us guessing your age right now.
24.
How 24-year-old Steve,
yeah,
what was he thinking when he bought his first pharmacy? What was going through his mind? Was he thinking, this is my first stepping stone? Was he thinking, I'm just going to buy this and be a local pharmacist, white picket fence, two and a half kids, a dog? Or was he thinking, I'm going to have 2,000 pharmacies by year 2030?
I guess if you go back to, you've got to understand the humble beginnings of somebody and where you're at. I mean, I actually did a master's degree and my specialty was pharmaceutics and tablet formulation. So I did that for a couple of years, thinking that I would actually be a researcher or end up in industry. And partway through that postgraduate degree, I actually realized that my passion was really around community pharmacy more than research. And in reality, in the research field, if you do want to get ahead and make a name for yourself, is first you have to do a PhD. And secondly, is you need to have the ability to travel and also, go and do a postdoc somewhere else. And that was the journey. And I must say, it probably didn't entice me that much to go down that path. And, I then thought, I really want to become a community pharmacist. And I had then, I'd met John Cardis, who's still my business partner in a number of ventures, or pretty much everything that I've done. And John and I, sort of decided to create a partnership without having bought a store. And, and the reason we went to regional Victoria was really because, to buy a pharmacy that was of a certain size to be able to sustain potentially, say, 2 families or 2 people, had to be of a certain size. And the only way that we could actually, make it work was actually to buy something in regional Victoria, because we were 24. We didn't have much money. I've still got a photocopy of the deposit checks that John and I had, used to buy our first shop, which is quite good. And there was no money, but there was a lot of desire to create, like a store. And regional Victoria was actually good because 2 young Greek boys, leaving the family nest was good. It was good to actually branch out. It wasn't really acceptable back in the early 90s that you left home just because you wanted to have a new start. But buying a new business gave me the excuse to say to my parents, there's a new venture and I want to do something else. So my parents were very supportive. They were very supportive in terms of the deposit, and they were also very supportive in terms of providing some asset backing to allow myself and John. So there was actually a lot of faith from their perspective to allow us to get into that first venture. But I certainly didn't have, when I look back at it now, and I look at, we're now in, April 2024, there are 1,200 odd stores, in the group.
Yeah.
And we touch, And if you look at our expanded group in terms of our loyalty platforms and other forms of engagement and buy it right, we probably touched 2,500 pharmacies.
Yes.
In our breadth, we look at that. But really, when you have your first shop, let me tell you, the first KPI was making sure we paid the wages, paid the rent, and kept our head above water. It was not. There was no vision at that point in time, in terms of creating a pharmacy group. And I must say, the time that I really thought about it was actually exactly 10 years in to our journey.
So 10 years into owning the one pharmacy is when you decided, let's buy a second one? Or was it more we could actually have a brand here?
No. If you sort of fast forward 10 years, there were a couple of other partners that had joined, and I think there were about 6 stores in the group at that stage. So we had expanded and bought some stores. But, what was sort of known as the Advantage Group up until recently really was born around the ability to work in a local regional community, to work in a really engaging manner with pharmacists that were traditionally our opposition. And it was really about creating an alignment even 22 years ago. And we had some stores in Gippsland. This other group had some stores further along in Gippsland, and they said, let's form a joint venture alignment and create a buying group, but not only a buying group, also a selling group, and a group that would allow us to get together to create better buying power, but also more importantly, the ability to sell in the market, because anybody can buy product. The ability to sell is actually far more difficult. So we sort of brought our 6 stores into the mix, and they had their 4 stores. So the first Advantage Group as such, and it was known as the Gippsland Pharmacy Group because it was very regional at the time and very sort of, in terms of geography. And we thought, 10 stores was actually enough. And it gave us a little bit of scale to do some buying. And then, the first store, because people have asked me, how did you have a vision of getting members and growing it? And I said, no, it was actually very much an internal strategy that we had, which was about just creating buying and cataloging services for us internally. And I never thought that there would be anybody that would want to join our group until somebody in the town next to us said, hey, these are great looking catalogs. I've had some people come in looking for these products. Am I able to join your group? And that was actually and it's actually a store that I now own with my partners. But it's interesting that, that was in 2004, and that was 2 years into the journey that someone actually approached us to be part of our group. And that's where it actually started. And then at that point, that was a point of inflection in my thinking, saying, well, I think we've actually got something that is maybe commercially viable for somebody to join.
And then from there, it grew to almost 200.
Yeah, well, if you look at the journey, from 2002 to 2013, there were only about 60 stores in the group at that time.
Yeah.
And most of them, I must admit, were owned by the core founding partners.
Yes.
That were in the mix. I think half of the stores were actually part of the ownership group at the time. And the real sort of growth really started to happen in 2015 when we had some strategies in place. And by the time we did our first merger with the Catalyst Instigo Group in October 2020, we had the Advantage Group had 280 stores in its stable.
Yeah. So 280 stores coming from Advantage. But wait a minute. I read an article somewhere because you appeared at APP 2020 and you're on a panel with Guy Russo from Kmart.
Yes.
CEO from Kmart. And I'm going to read you a quote that you said that day. So you said, like Kmart, key internal drivers such as range, price, and customer engagement are the key matrices in which our Advantage Pharmacy and Chemist Discount Center brand strategies are executed. Further to this, when combined with data analytics, IT integration, and an inventory management platform, pharmacies have full visibility to enable them to navigate what has become a complex and competitive retail environment. So when you said that statement, you also
Mm-hmm.
had Chemist Discount Center under your belt,
Mm-hmm.
Advantage Pharmacy.
Yes.
Catalyst was about to join, and you were about to have that first merger happen.
Well, I believe, yes, correct. Yes. Yep. I think that was actually 2019 because there was no APP in 2020. But anyway, it was actually pre-merger. But anyway, yep.
Pre-merger.
Yeah.
And you also had Bite Right, it looks like,
Yes, we
as
had Bite
well
Right.
as Know It All, the loyalty and reporting platform.
Yes.
So that first merger, was this the execution plan? Was it purely to get ranges, pricing, customer engagement? Was it to be in the forefront of the industry?
Well, when I look back at the merger, interestingly, Michael Flannery and I had sort of met, in the 90s because he was an AmCal pharmacist as well, and we met at conferences, and we had our first. We always have a joke now and say we had our first formal meeting in July 2002, and we didn't consummate our deal until October 2020. So it was an 18-year courting process. But when I look back and reflect on why I wanted to do the merger with Michael Flannery was, I think the first and foremost is you've got to be aligned with your partners, and you've got to want the same things. You could be different on certain aspects, but you need to be aligned on the core pieces. And one of the fundamental drivers for the merger was this ability to create scale,
Okay.
because scale is so important in terms of synergies. And when I look at the market today, when I look at that propensity for investment and what is needed in order for a brand to grow or a group, is scale is so important in your ability to be able to invest in programs and services. When I look at Buy It Right in its early days, I did it for my own group of say 25 stores. Well, when you look at it today, as of today, we've got over 400 stores, plus, and moving towards, I would say our target is to get to 2,000 stores in the next 2 years. But when you look at that, we first started to think about sort of serving ourselves as we did in Advantage in the very early days. But 25 stores does not support an IT platform. It is so costly. And part of the reason of doing the merger with Catalyst Instigo was to then create a bigger platform. So I've taken it from my own group of 25 stores to the Advantage group, to the merged entity in 2020, which was Pharmacy Platform,
Yes.
and now to IPA as a greater group. But the real driver was about synergies and scale and the ability to invest into the independent pharmacy space.
Well, you've just mentioned IPA, so I'm going to ask you some questions around that. So IPA stands for Independent Pharmacies of Australia. Now, Can you take me into the room where the decision was made on how you were going to come up with IPA, Independent Pharmacies of Australia? I mean, what was happening in that room? Basically, even tell me, if you can, who was in that room?
If I look back at it, I think it was actually Dennis Bastos and myself, and it was actually, believe it or not, I don't want to take the mystery away from it, but it was actually a name that was actually owned and registered by the business many years ago.
Oh,
so the IPA or the Independent Pharmacies of Australia group name was actually a registered entity that we had. It's just that it wasn't used in a trading entity, and it was really. And the reason why it came about was, if you go back to the merger of Advantage and and Instigo Catalyst to create Pharmacy Platform, and then in March 2022, Pharmacy Platform merged with Pharmacy Alliance, and then we created the Platform Alliance Group. And I must say we were very sensitive to, and people say to me now, the Platform Alliance Group name wasn't as relevant as what IPA or Independent Pharmacies of Australia is. And the reason that we actually went with the Platform Alliance name was actually taking part of each of the name of the groups. And it was really around being sensitive to our members, because it was actually a true merger. If the merger with Pharmacy Platform and Pharmacy Alliance, if we kept one of our heritage names, our members would have seen it as one group taking over the other, and it wasn't that. It was always truly, and history, the last 2 years has actually proven that it was a true merger, and hence the name. But there was a point in time, last year, where we actually sort of stood back and reflected on who do we truly represent, and and who are our members and what are they wanting. And there was this moment where we sort of used words of, part of what we do is, it's about independence. And to me, independence means choice. And one of the great things about our group is the fact is it allows our members to have choice as to how they practice and how they want to work. And so we're supporting their independence to work in their local community. So whether you want to be a neighbourhood model as Advantage or Alliance, or you want to be a discounter as CDC, or sort of be a Catalyst member with your own identity, or be a super compliant model, very patient focused as in Complete Care Pharmacy. No matter where you want to be in that pharmacy practice spectrum, is we give you the independence to actually work in that. The second part of it, to me, was around sustainability, and how do we as a group allow our members to have a sustainable business. And fundamentally, members that join our group do it for us to provide them with trading terms and commercial arrangements so they can be more profitable. So as much as we want to also talk about the implementation of professional services and programs, and I can talk about that later, fundamentally all of that gets wrapped up into a commercial element, is that we need to create sustainability for our members. And the last part is, how do we help them get involved in their local community and produce better and healthier outcomes? And we need to provide that framework for our members to be independent. They've got to run a commercial enterprise, and we have to make them sustainable. We have to help them implement programs and services and full scope of practice, and whatever the profession throws at us, we need to be able to do that, and also making sure that ultimately it's around the patient and health outcomes in a local community, no matter where you are. And they're, to me, the fundamental pillars of IPA. And the name that we launched at APP this year has had a tremendous uptake in terms of not only like the pharmacists and the profession, but I think as the brand develops, it will also be consumer facing. So it's not only a B2B, but it'll be a B2C concept as well. So it's a name that will resonate, and we've got some great plans in how we grow that brand in local communities. And if you use the analogy that we used at APP, that we want to be the IGA of pharmacy. We want to be that bastion, that promoter of independence, the independent pharmacist, and how we allow that pharmacist to practice the way that they want, but also how we drive consumers and patients into their store to help keep them relevant and sustainable. Because there are going to be some challenges. When I reflect back and people say to me, "Oh, where do you see some of the challenges?" Like I see, reduced customer flow in pharmacy as a real problem. The consumer is savvy. There are many more points where they can actually purchase their goods. They're looking online, etc. And our job is to keep our members, and talk about sustainability, is how are we going to navigate through that? What are the program services? What's the marketing that we're going to do to drive consumers into their store? Because we are now 12 or 13 months into the first and second tranche of the 60 days. So the 60-day, the last one came in a month ago. We're now not even 12 months. It's 6, 7. Yeah. So we had the 2 tranches. So it's, call it, say 6, 7 months in, 2 tranches. I don't think we've actually had, the impact hasn't actually started to wash through yet. And I think the impact of 60 days will start to impact pharmacy negatively. What I'm most concerned about is the fact that, it'll reduce the number of patients that are coming into our store, and the number of times in the year and our ability to engage with them. And, part of our role as a franchisor is to make sure that, that we continue to have patients coming into the store and giving them a reason to visit their local pharmacy.
Very true, Steve. So if you were to say the point of difference of IPA and other banner groups that are out there on the market, our point of difference is the ability for our members to be fully independent and to tap into all the resources and all the advantages that IPA offers, which means the buying deals, the marketing, the professional services, the technology that is being developed and probably going to continue being developed.
Look, and I think, when you mentioned the point around technology, I think technology is a huge driver in our business and a huge point of difference. And it comes back to that point earlier around needing the scale to, to actually, unless you've got a number of members and, like an audience to sell to, these platforms are so costly to run and so costly to develop. When I look at the first inception of Bite Right to what it is today, 15 years on, they're totally different. And IT and loyalty are those things that actually just keep on evolving, and it helps keep us young. It helps get us out of bed, and it's like I'm enthused about technology, the way that we engage with our members, and and it's really technology and automation is really around how do we make life easier for the pharmacist? How do they get the right product, right price, right time? How do they delete the obsolete stock that's in their system? That's one part of it. But also what it really fundamentally, for me, automation, when someone says to me, what is the reason that you're investing in it? It's about increasing patient engagement for the pharmacist. It's all about freeing up the pharmacist from those mundane tasks, using some technology and some smarts to run a better business, but also freeing them up. So whether it be, buy it right, know it all, whether it be automation in terms of robots, etc., it all comes back to how do we allow the pharmacist to have more time with their patient in a more meaningful way. And that's why you make the investment, because it frees you up. Because the fundamental reason, or I think the greatest point of engagement that a patient has with us is at that time of when you're counselling them and you're giving them the advice. At the end of when you've prepared the script and you're going through their product information and you're going through the side effects and the contraindications, that's where you have the most value. It's not in taking in the script so much or the art of dispensing. What is really important for the patient is the amount of time and the environment that you provide to actually counsel and actually help them in their journey to stay healthy. And that's the sort of the platform that, and all these platforms, when I did my first, I wasn't even a trainee, when I was a year 10 student, the store that I went to, had a typewriter. They didn't have computers back then, or the store that I certainly had worked in, actually got a computer a couple of years later. But I could see, if I compare it between now and then, is the amount of time it would take to type out a label, making an error.
Were you doing
that? Automation. Yeah. All of that. Yeah. I didn't really get to do it because I was a year 10 student observing. But I remember in that week, in that pharmacy that I was at, he had an electric typewriter and, all those things. And, and it was a noisy dispensary because of that. So, I can say that I'm of that generation that, at least I got to observe, the old way. And and all of the automation that we're doing and the investment is really around, getting the pharmacist from behind the counter and onto the shop floor.
And very true. So leading on to that, because you've started talking about technology, IPA's vision, where are we going? So looking ahead, if you had a crystal ball, and I'm sure your crystal ball, if you were 18 or 24, would never have shown you this, but looking ahead, what are the future plans and aspirations for IPA?
So firstly, it's around how do we engage with more members. So it's really around a strategy of engaging and growing our pool of members, which then allows us to invest back in the business. Another big part of the investment is I'm a staunch advocate for pharmacist independence. In other words, is to work in the way that they want to work, and what is relevant to their local community. So you might find some local communities, a discounter may be relevant or it may not, or people want an independent model. Part of what our group does is it gives you that choice as to how you want to practice. And I think that is something that not many other groups have. They don't have a house of brands to be able to give you that choice. So they may have one brand or two brands maximum, and that's the choice. Whereas, we have an array of members across a different number of brands, and that's important. The other bit, which is, that we're very focused on, is the adaptation of technology, but also the way that we're going to adapt to the different community pharmacy agreements and how we help our members implement the programs and services that they want. And this comes back to, against the core of independence, to say, as a franchisor and as a provider, my role in our organisation is to ensure that we as a group, whether it be full scope of practice, NDIS, and all the programs that are available, we as a franchisor need to have those available for our members. It's then up to the member to take on what's relevant for their community. So I keep on coming back to independence and community, and it's around that, it's not one size fits all. What's fundamental to our group and has always been, and I want to make sure that we maintain the founder's mentality in our business. And that's why it's important that, I've stepped back in together with Michael Flannery, is the fundamentals of the groups that we've, whether it be Pharmacy Alliance, Advantage, Catalyst, those groups were created by pharmacists for pharmacists. And the reason why I believe they have been successful is because I will do for my members what I am prepared to do in my own stores. And I will not ask anybody to do something that either goes against the grain or I wouldn't fundamentally do. So, we've got to be ethical in our behavior. But I think what endears us to the membership is that, you can see I'm very invested in my group. I'm invested in terms of as a pharmacist, as a member, as a managing director, but also making sure that we stay relevant. And, that connection that I have with my own stores, I think keeps me connected to my member, because, whatever programs and services we roll out are fundamentally trialed and executed at a store level before they go into the membership. And, and I think it actually keeps the programs relevant. I think what our challenge is now is, whenever the guild government come up with the next 8 CPA, is how do we help our members be able to implement their programs and services and whatever they choose in the most timely manner possible.
So,
and
yes, go on.
And because I reflect back, and I spoke about this at APP, I reflected back to 2006, when during that, I think it was the 6th CPA, and there was a period, it took our group 2 years to implement some programs, because it was slow, no one else was doing it. And, we, in effect, wasted 2 out of 5 years in just a process to implement and do med reviews and other programs. It just took us time to develop because nobody was actually focused on them, because we were also dispensing in our business.
Yeah.
Our role now as IPA is to say, as soon as these programs, whether it be full scope, the pilots, any of those programs, our job is to make sure that in a timely manner we make them available so pharmacists implement them and actually get the maximum, financial and professional reward in those programs.
That's actually really good that you said that, because I was going to ask you a question to say, what do you say to that pharmacy owner who says, that's all good and fine for you, Steve. You own X amount of stores within the IPA brand. How do we know that you're not going to just look out for yourself and your pharmacies, but you're looking out for me too, who owns just one out of this big number of members? What do you say to that owner?
I guess from my end is, we're giving them the choice of what programs and services, they will take on. We're not prescriptive in terms of saying that they must take a particular program or service. The challenge for me is I need to actually make sure that we as an organization actually produce the programs and services that our members want. And, sometimes it means that, we need to actually have a documentation and a process, for 20 services, knowing that only maybe 5 may be taken up by the majority of our membership. So, very much, the challenge for us is, I don't know what programs and services our member may want. We need to provide as many as possible in a timely manner. So, whether you're the small individual or, you own a number of stores in the group, I think it's actually not relevant. What it comes down to is, what is your franchisor doing? What is their vision in terms of the professional services? How are they helping you write, or how are they writing the manuals, the standard operating procedures, and how can you access that quickly to be able to, implement what you need, whether it be for, professional or commercial gain.
So it's almost like we're offering a menu of sorts of different services, different products, different, terms and agreements. And you come in and you say, okay, this works for me. But you're not having to reinvent the wheel. You're not having to go into the kitchen and cook it yourself. We've got it already, ready for you. We've got chefs ready for you to help you implement. We've got a team on the ground who's out there daily visiting pharmacies and saying, how you going with the simplest of tasks, as well as people in head office who work still in pharmacy as well, who are like, oh, the program we want to do here is not going to work the way we want to do it. People don't have time. The pharmacists actually are strapped for time. We need to bring in technology, or we need to bring in a simpler version.
Well, the beauty of IPA is, the fact that we're flexible in our approach, but also, modular. So, pharmacists need to have the flexibility to choose what they want, and it's modular. There are stores that may take on 1 or 2 programs. There are other stores that take, 5 plus. Our job is to provide that. And, we have 8+ pharmacists on our team, and pharmacy coaches. No other group actually really provides the service in terms of that breadth where people get called upon. We check in with them. I mean, the process. You yourself have been part of that development about how we check in, how we help pharmacists grow their professional part of their business as well as their retail. But what I'm really buoyed with is the fact that professional services can actually add so much value to your business. Not only there's the commercial aspect, the monetary reward that people may get. There's also the professional satisfaction award that there's a lot of professional satisfaction that you get, in that you're practicing the art of pharmacy and what you've fundamentally been trained for. The stores, for me, and in my experiences, the stores that are able to provide that environment where these professional services and full scope of practice has been taken up, you attract much better candidates as pharmacists, because they've also got the ability to practice in the way that they want. And I think that is fundamental, to what we do. But also the third point is, it's really around, not only do you get that reward, but also the bottom line actually substantially adds to your business value. And that's one of the things that people sometimes don't think about, because you could have somebody giving you a cash up front incentive payment to join their group, or to, or a particular product range, etc. But that doesn't actually add sustainable value to your pharmacy. Whereas if you're doing, professional services and you're adding some real dollars that are sustainable and replicatable to your bottom line, it then adds quite a bit of value to your pharmacy. And that's one of the messages that I have for our members, is to say, make sure that you invest in that part of it, not only for the emotional connection that you have with your patients, and and some of the feedback from patients, as you know, is wonderful as far as the way that we engage with them, but it's also the financial reward, because it's the way the banks see that income. It's sustainable, it's replicatable, and it adds an incredible value to some stores. And when I look at the average, when I look at sort of through our programs and services and our pharmacists, we've been able to at times, double the professional services income that a pharmacy gets through our brands and our pharmacist coaches. And that adds, quite a bit of value to that particular business, as well as that professional satisfaction, which, I don't think you can put a value on, but I know that, those stores that actually practice in that way actually have pharmacists wanting to come and work in that environment.
Very true, very true. I was just doing a report the other day and looking at all the services that IPA pharmacies have delivered. We've delivered well and truly over 1.5 million COVID vaccines. We've delivered over 4,000 UTI services just in the short space of time, since I only looked from the 31st of July for the UTI services. And in that space of time, we've delivered over 4,000 services just for full scope. So you're right. It does make coming to work it makes it worthwhile. But as we close up, I just want to ask you 3 more questions. First question I'm going to ask is, if you could go back and talk to that little overweight kid who was going into the pharmacy on a weekly basis to get an aspirin tincture, what would you say to him if you could go back and talk to him today?
I guess it's, if I look back, I'd say, be bold, sort of take away sort of self-doubts and just back yourself. And, one of the things that I've actually found, I was, 8 or 10 at the time, but I look at my progression through the profession, and there are certain points where I've changed my attitude and, got rid of the barriers and the negative sort of, commentary that's sometimes in your head, and the ability, to go bold and to go large and to invest. The most important thing is, I would say, is what's led to our success is the investment in people, and and getting the right people to do the job. Always, gives you the desired outcome. That's been my experience. So I would say it took me a while to kind of crack the shell, but now that I feel that we've got that scalability, I think there's, to get from 1,200 to 2,000 stores, I think is actually achievable.
Well done. 2 more questions. So it is a tradition on this podcast that the last 2 questions come, one from an IPA team member, and the other one actually comes from ChatGPT. So,
right. Okay.
Your first question from an IPA team member comes from Caitlin Rolfe, who is currently the acting project manager. She's based here in Sydney. You will know that. So she's asking, running a successful business can be demanding. How do you strike a healthy balance between your work and personal life? And Steve, I'm going to admit, I Googled you, and man, do you run. You're always running. You're running for something. The last one I saw, you were running, what was it, for Lifeline. You're always in activewear. How do you strike a balance?
I think one of the important things is that, there's a Greek saying along the lines of, everything must be with measure. And I think it's important that, you do your work and you work in the environment. But it's one of those things is you've got to make time for your health. Otherwise, you're going to make time for your illness later. And, I'm a very strong advocate that, life is, in my running analogy, life is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and you've got to try and fit it all in. And I think part of it, and for all of us, the challenge is, whether it be running, whether it be Pilates, whether it be different activities, what's really important is that you make some time to decompress, whatever that is. To me, it's actually getting together with a group of friends and going for a bit of a run, training for a marathon, and actually just spending time together, or a bike ride. And now other people tend to have golf as an outlet, etc. But mine is really running, and running marathons, and being lucky enough to go around the world and do these events and visit some amazing places would have to be, out of work, one of my really proud moments.
Your family is quite important as well, because You mentioned that you actually go back home now to Greece. Can I call it home?
No, Australia is home, but it's the birthplace of my parents. But I very much identify as an Australian with a Greek background.
So that's quite important because your family is also quite embedded. You tell me little stories. Every time I see you, you tell me a little story about, what you're doing with your family. Always.
Yeah.
Always. Which is really good. Because at the end of the day, I think that seeps down into the work culture as well. We end up being a family within IPA, the organization, and then we take on the members as part of our family as well. And that's one thing I've seen resonate throughout everything we do, whether it was at APP, where we were like, what are you doing? Let's go out, and just gathering our members around us. You could see it. You definitely can. And I must commend you on that, because that would come straight from you.
Well, look, I think we're all we're very social, and like I said, work is good, but the actual social aspect, but also one of the where I feel very fortunate in my life is my role has allowed me to meet lots of amazing people and inspirational people, and the breadth of our group now just gives me a bigger platform to connect with people, and it's just wonderful, like the social aspect, and the family aspect, and spending time with kids, and my kids are a little bit older now and not so reliant, and like I do have like some regrets about not spending as much time with them when they were younger and in those formative years. But I guess it's one of the trade-offs that have come with doing what I'm doing now. But I I think it's important that it comes back to that, everything with measure, and, you've got to look after your health, and, you've also got to make sure that you spend time with your family and loved ones, because they're the ones that you revert back to in times of need. So, I'm actually very fortunate that, I still have an extended family overseas that I might see, once every few years. But I must admit, it's great to go and visit and holiday and just decompress and switch off from what we're doing and come back refreshed. It's good.
So ChatGPT wants to know, if you
Right.
could magically add one unconventional feature to your pharmacy overnight to surprise your customers, what would it be and why?
An unconventional
Feature.
feature.
And it's to surprise your customers.
Yeah. I would say an after hours click and collect, especially for our regional patients and in pharmacies where you're only working those traditional hours of 9 to 6 as an example, and you have patients that have needs outside of those hours. So if I could magically, whether it be a vending machine or a click and collect box outside the pharmacy, if I could magically do something in 24 hours today, that's what I would do.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
And then Melody has a question too.
Oh, okay. So an extra question.
When are you buying me a pharmacy, or buying the pharmacist within IPA a pharmacy?
You know what, Melody? That is a strategy that was actually in the group. And I think that this goes back to the philosophy, and I'm glad that you challenged me on it, because I will put it on my to-do list. Now, and I will make it happen, because fundamentally, when you talk about, the group has been created, by pharmacists for pharmacists, and our strong pharmacy heritage. And we talk about our pharmacy coaches. We talk about the stores that the founders own as part of the group and are connected. One of the points that actually really came up a few years ago was really, how do we actually then take it to the next level, where we support some of our pharmacists internally to be able to invest in a store and also use it as a test site, the crash dummy, so to speak, to be able to run programs. And I think that, to me, is what will really help gel some of our pharmacists and make them sticky to our head office, but also invest with us, but also have it as a place where they can go and they can test some of their theories in their own store and the practicality. So I'll give you a pledge. It's now early 2024. I would say that by the end of this calendar year, we should have something in the opportunity for our team that wanting to invest, to give them that platform to invest in. So
you heard it here, everybody.
There you go.
So I'll put it in our calendars and check up on Steve.
That's it. You put it in the calendar and you hold me to it. And then my reply to you is when we buy this store and you're there, I will interview you and the team on a podcast where I become the host.
Definitely. At Independent Pharmacies of Australia Group, we're dedicated to supporting a network of leading independent and bannered pharmacies nationwide with a vision to connect all member pharmacies under the Independent Pharmacies of Australia national brand, recognized by Australians for elevating community healthcare to meet local needs. Thank you for joining us today on the Pharmacy Podcast. We appreciate your support in our mission to shape a thriving and patient-centric pharmacy industry. For more information about Independent Pharmacies of Australia, you can visit our website, ipagroup.com, or stay connected with us on social media. Thank you once again for joining us. We look forward to welcoming you back as we continue our journey towards enhancing community healthcare together.